What's up, everybody? We wanted to take a quick moment to remind each of you to please like, share, comment, subscribe to the podcast. Tommy,
Ring that bell.
ring the bell. It goes a long way to support the podcast. Besides that, Tommy and I offer online coaching. The links for that will be below. The link for my merch store will be below as well. And without further ado, we bring to you a Thinking Man's podcast. A Thinking Man's podcast. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of A Thinking Man's podcast. I'm Joseph PIRCHER. Alongside me, the one and only Tommy Stiles. What's up, Tommy? How are you?
Good, man. How are we?
We're doing all right. I'm back home right now. I'm coming to you guys live from New Jersey this time, so no coaching background this time. Coming at you from Eastern Standard Time this time, but yeah, everything's good. So I think for everyone that listened last week, want to give a big shout out to everybody that pulled up the episode with John Jewett. If you didn't catch that episode, we were fortunate enough to have John on to discuss some common pitfalls that he sees in peak week, and then how he goes about, kind of mitigating those mistakes and coming up with different solutions. So definitely a good one to check out. And then this week, I think you and I both kind of enjoy topics like this the most. So we're going to discuss how we would go about training, programming, the whole 9 yards when bringing up weak body parts is on the menu. So Tommy, why don't we start with you and kind of lay out, because I know you've had these like kind of specialized splits that you've done for yourself. I know if a client of yours requires that, you have a really nice approach with how you go about this. So why don't you kick us off and we'll just let it roll from there.
Yeah. So the way I look into programming is it would be mostly coming out of a show for me, but if you repeated, it could be, coming out of a fat loss phase or somewhere where you're at least leaning. You can, once you see yourself peel down and you see like, all right, this is where I'm holding more muscle tissue, or this is where I'm holding more size. What's the first place that loses size right away? That's the area I want to address. So for me, it was chest. That's the biggest point on my physique, I feel, other than size. I'm great on delts. I have good delt to delt width. Front delts are overdeveloped, probably because I pressed wrong for years and years. So when it comes to programming, for me, I wanted the emphasis to be on chest. So what that means is all of my pressing is chest biased. Closest I get to anything for front delts or shoulders would be a high incline press. But I don't do anything that's at a 90-degree angle. I don't do. Everything will at least be at like that 75-degree angle press or lower. So for probably 20 weeks of 2022, my push started with 4 chest movements. And then I would actually do my tricep work next. And then I would finish with medial delt work. I had rear delts on pull. But because I know that my delts are responsive, I know that if they ever were to fall behind, to bring them up, it would just require me to increase the volume from to a place I want to put on tissue, or I want to bring them up. And that's kind of things you learn along the way. Like what's a part that you have the best mind muscle connection with? If you're newer, is probably one that will respond better than one that you don't have a connection to. So commonly, I think people connect more with quads than hamstrings. More people connect with chest than back, or push movements than back typically. Sure. I've always been kind of like back came relatively easier to me than chest. So
we can see it.
Yeah. So when it comes to programming, it's based. So it's still the push pull legs has been the variation of split that I've followed. It's just been amended to fit mine the years. So I know another is I want to bring my arms up rather than, and this is a common critique of push pull leg. You can't bring up your arms or the arms don't get enough work. I just think it has to be you have to the arm volume in different ways across the week. That's the only way to do it. But for instance, I start every leg day with 2 bicep movements. So I used to do biceps at the end of legs, but I found I was just too fried, CNS and mentally. It's kind of like doing ab the workout. Like, yeah, I'll get it next week. So for me, if I start the day with biceps, I've already got blood flowing and my mind's into connecting to muscles before I get into legs. So it's a win-win. And then tricep gets hit with push day. And then I don't actually do any dips on pull day, because I always do at least a supinated pull down movement, whether it's cable or the hammer strength. So for me, the biceps are getting indirect work there. And then if I want to, that's volume on leg day and push day, and I add more in, I'd probably add in, I could put biceps on with pull, or I could throw in a couple sets of triceps at the end of pull day. It's really, I think you just have to get out of these boxes of like certain things have to be grouped together. Like you can do, any body part together. There's no rules.
There's no rules.
Split. Yeah. I think people get carried away like, hey, what's your split? Like, well, It's been catered. It's being constantly amended to fit what my physique is. So those are just intro programming things that I wanted to touch on to get this thing going. And then if you're listening to this and like, you're one of those people that's like, you can't make a decision to your own programming. We do this, but hire a coach, hire someone that's going to put the thought into it for you. And I'm willing to bet you'll learn a ton more about your physique just following someone's guidance rather than trying to figure all this out on your own. That's how I got to get to the point where I can program for myself. And I'm sure you're the same. Is I had someone doing my programming for nearly 10 years straight. It wasn't like I was figuring stuff out on my own. It was someone was giving me programming. I was giving them feedback like, hey, I don't connect with this movement, or like, then I key in my own physique, what's developing and what's not. It's not. So I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, and that's a great point too, because I come across this a ton too. Like, I think the first part of bringing up your weak parts is even knowing what your weak body parts are. I mean, I feel like for a lot of us, we wind up being our own harshest critic, and we're acutely aware of what needs to come up. But sometimes maybe you're newer, or you have no interest in like coaching, or maybe I get some guys that just want to be big and want to be a better bodybuilder, but they don't really even follow like, competitive pro bodybuilding or anything. I'm always amazed at how difficult it is for most people to objectively look at their own physique. So it's like, man, hire a coach, because there's times where I have people that come to me and they're like, part of my initial assessment, it's like, what do you see as a weakness in your own physique, or what do you want to bring up the most? And people will put arms, and it's like, man, your arms are your best body part. Like, unless you just want like 25-inch guns at the beach, like we need to fill everything else in. So I think that's a big one, is just having a second set of eyes for all of it. Somebody that's removing the emotion of it and able to take an objective look at it. And then, like you said, you can kind of start to tailor the whole split based around what needs to come up. Because just naturally, I mean, of course, I think we'll probably touch on making sure that your execution is on point for a weaker body part, making sure that you're able to stabilize everything around that target muscle, which has been a big problem for me, like at the shoulder joint, like working to improve stability at different end ranges. These are like these little extras that you can do, but let's just say, for, argument's sake, within this podcast, to make it simple, like let's say that execution is already excellent. People are already doing this mobility, stability work, and like these little extras to get the most out of the work that they are doing. Even with all those things being true, there are going to be some body parts that you just don't connect with the same, and it's a struggle, and you almost feel like you're guessing in some of the ranges or movements that you're doing. So in that case, it only makes sense that volume has to come up for those weak body parts to make up for that lost stimulus from maybe not getting the most out of X number of sets like you do with other body parts. So it's almost like a big puzzle. Like look at this person's schedule, look at how much stress that they're under during the week. Like if they work a crazy high stress, high hour corporate job, they're running around with kids, all these different things. That's going to take away sleep, of course, is another huge one. All of those things are going to take away from how much total workload someone can handle in the gym. So, you want to look at that person's situation first, and then from there you kind of fill it in backwards. Like, okay, if for example, your legs need to come up, especially like if we're talking like male bodybuilders and their legs need to come up, you're probably going to be training legs twice a week with some adequate volume in both sessions. So that's just going to take a lot. So then it's like, okay, how strong are some of these other body parts? I'm thinking about it like, what body parts can we pull from so that we can make up the difference in adding excessive or additional amounts of volume. Like we've talked about it before, Tommy, and I think you mentioned this, like it's an overall recovery budget. Like if you have 100 units of recovery, let's say, and those 2 leg workouts that you're going to do is going to take up 60% of that budget or 65% of that budget, like you're going to have to do a little less elsewhere. And I had this conversation with a client yesterday. Actually, they were almost a little concerned about the amount of volume they were doing for one body part compared to a couple others. And it's like, no, this one body part, you're not, you're maybe complaining or unhappy with the amount of volume we're doing. That's your best body part. Like we don't need to bring that up right now. We need to bring these other ones up. And that's why volume is twice what it is over there. So I think just setting, taking in what your whole situation is, having an idea of how much total work you can handle, and then kind of piecing it all together. Like you said, I have guys, man, there's a couple of guys that I can think of off the top of my head that are bodybuilders that might have awesome quads, like specifically awesome quads, but they need a ton of adductor to fill that gap in. And it's like, they might do adductor work separate of their leg days. They might start 3 workouts a week with adductors. And it's like, you're damn right, they're going to come up at a certain point. But then that also might mean that you do less hamstring work. You might not even have a hip hinge in if you're doing adductors 3 times a week. So it's just kind of this balancing act. And then also, I think, one final consideration of what I can, just recall off the top of my head, one final thing to consider would be how taxing on an overall level are the workouts or, the body parts that need to improve. Like we were saying before, if legs need to improve, like just top to bottom, front to back, your legs need to improve. And you're basically doing like 2 full leg days. Maybe you're doing, 10 to 14 working sets of quads over 2 sessions and, 6 to 10 working sets of hamstrings. That's a lot. Like you're probably not going to be able to also focus on your back at the same time, where it's like tons of systemic fatigue. So I always think about that in like the hierarchy of how much it's going to cost me to train these body parts as I need to make them improve. Now, I'm currently in a phase where my arms need to come up most, and then maybe my delts are probably second. So it's like I can do a ton of volume for both bis and tris at the same time, because it's not my quads and my back. Like it's just my bis and my tris. So I'm trying to bring those up with more volume, more frequency. But then because of that, like, okay, in my example, my quads are my best body part. I do 4 working sets a week for quads. And looking at my pictures, I could probably get away with less because it feels like they continue to grow. And I'm doing 20 something sets for arms. So there's this kind of give and take. So luckily for me, like legs are probably the most difficult body part to train, and I can get away with doing the least amount of work there. So I can put a pretty big chunk of that budget towards everything upper body, and then specifically a smaller muscle group like arms.
Yeah, no, I like that thought process because, like you said, for legs, I think legs is probably the one thing that takes the most out of people to train because it requires the most, CNS involvement. for me,
you're probably recruiting the most fibers that you possibly could over the course of one workout too. I mean, you think about it, it's half of your physique in one day.
yeah. So for me, right off, almost every client I can, if I'm focusing on leg improvement, their leg days are coming off of a rest day, so they're fresh.
Yes. Yeah.
And if I were to add maybe taking this even further, if I'm giving them excess calories for the week, it's probably going in on that rest day, so it's assimilated and being put to use for leg day. All these little components that you start to factor in when it comes to programming, like how is my week structured? So for me, when I had 2 leg days a week, and now I just do a great push pull, like the old school variation, push pull off, legs off, repeat. But when
do you have rotations in between that? Because that's just 5 days. So will you come back to the same movements, or there's 2 rotations and it's basically once every 10 days?
2 rotations once every 10.
Yeah.
I find that's the best to keep the movements, without having to switch too frequently. And then
you're preventing like overuse injuries as well. Like if you're coming in and like, we both have that Cybex leg press in our gym, like tremendous piece, awesome to get loaded in full knee flexion. But if you're going to come in and load that thing up and do it every 5 days, like somebody's going to come knocking eventually, and you're going to have to answer for that.
Right. Yeah. There's so many plates you're going to put on that core connective tissue. It just takes a beating. And that's actually what I found when I was doing lower frequency was that strength jumps were higher week to week, but I just hit a wall sooner in terms of like the connective tissue and just, needing to deload more frequently to where if I increase the frequency, I'm not as strong as fast. And anybody that's followed kind of see like my weights are lower than what I was doing, but I've been able to add more volume. I've been able to connective tissue in a better place. And the need to deload is like, I still think every 6 weeks is kind of my sweet spot, but I think I could extend it further if needed in certain pushes. So you made a point about like, you need to decrease the working capacity of other muscle. Like if legs is 60% of your recovery budget, you only have 40 for the rest of your body. So something else, a lot of thing else basically is taking a backseat during that portion, that phase you're in. The split you're in, it's ever changing, it's ever evolving. So what you're doing right now with your delts and your arms, I'm sure after a certain weeks or months, you're going to change that and you're going to, assess the results that you're able to get, make notes of it for the future, and then, rinse, wash, repeat with another phase with a different, what's my goal this phase? Obviously all bodybuilders, we all look at ourselves critically. It needs to come up always. I'm never one to admit like that I have strong body parts, but when I remove emotion, I can look at it and be like, all right, been doing this X amount of years. Like the delts seem to respond to whatever movement you do, no matter how little you do or how much you do. So
Tommy, what's an example? Like you're pushing to grow your chest right now, and then some arms, like, you were saying like you'll go through basically all of your chest work, all of your tricep work, then just touch up on delts. So like, your delts, like you said, are kind of hyper responsive. Like, so what's an example? What's the volume you're doing in a week for delts?
Currently it's probably at most
3 sets a session or something.
3 a session, and then 6 across a 10-day period.
Right.
So, and that's like your quads, like I could probably get away without doing any delts one of those sessions and just doing it every other.
Sure.
A good point is I don't remember the year, but I remember Dusty and John Meadows helped him get a 3 leg week split.
I remember. Yeah.
And then Dusty had to, in turn, he only did back twice a month. Because one, it was such an overdeveloped body part. It didn't stimulus. And 2, he needed the recovery intense leg days every week. So I think this is a good time to bring up, like if you're, a wellness girl listening to this, or you have wellness aspiration, your whole split is probably devoted to legs. You know what I mean? Like 75% of it anyway. So
it is. Yeah.
You need to, your budget has to be tailored to legs, and then it also has to be catered to. That's a division that's built on imbalance. we're buyers. We want to be balanced head to toe. Other divisions listening as well, but with wellness, they want the lower body heavy. So if you're someone who has a very responsive upper body, that might put you in a place where you're not training upper a few months at a time just because you can't let it get any bigger. So they're all just important things to note for your specific division. But as a, younger people listening, like, I think it's funny that you said, because I have the same thing in my questionnaire where I ask, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? And hardly anyone to give themselves any credit, like, oh, this is my strength. And I get that. I'm the same way. But, when you tell a young client, yeah, you got a good set of biceps, or, hey, your quads are pretty good, they're almost like, really?
Yeah.
To hear that, like, they have anything good going. So,
yeah.
It is important to be, that's why I ask for a self-assessment. And then another benefit of having a coach is you have that unbiased, non-emotionally opinion looking at you too.
Yeah. That's so funny that you said that. I mean, and I've been that guy too, when I send in an assessment to a new coach and it's like, here are the 3 things that really need to come up. And, the other 2 just need to come up too. Like there's nothing. I got to give him credit. The first time, so Phil Viz kind of put my quads on the map for me mentally. I sent him my assessment, sent him all my picks, everything. And it was pretty much like, okay, you're right. Everything needs to come up, but your quads are awesome. Don't change anything. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, I guess I'm doing this all right then. But then also, so to your point, like with wellness, that's a great example. Because it seems like even, I have lifestyle girls even that, like, maybe they aren't sure if they want to actually get on stage, but they're like, I want to look like a wellness competitor. And it's like, okay, your split is going to be 2 to 4 leg workouts every 7 to 9 days, like, depending on what you can recover from. And then there's also the consideration, like, I have like this awesome access to people that are at the highest level of, this sport, especially like with the Jew, it's both John and Renee. And seeing Renee, man, like, she has a super responsive upper body, like her traps and her delts. She has got some crazy genetics for those body parts, to where, like, they told her last year, they were like, they said to John, because John's coaching her, they were like, hey man, like, she looks great from the waist down, but it's almost too much up top. Like, she's so dry and hard up top. Like, you almost need to decondition her upper body a little bit. So she basically, man, I swear to you, that woman trains legs every day. It seems like, I think she probably trains legs 3 or 4 times in the week, and then has one, like, no disrespect to her training, but it's intentional, like a half-ass upper body day where she does like one set of like 6 different upper body movements, and then that's it. And it's like, she's gonna be on the Olympia stage for wellness. So if this is what's being rewarded and this is what they're looking for, you really have to tailor what you're doing in the gym, like, to not what's fun or not what's entertaining or not what you like to do. Hey, can we do this? Because I just love this movement. It's like, does this fit in with your goals? And if the answer objectively is no, like, you kind of just have to put that aside, and do what is needed to be done. That's if you're somebody that wants to be competitive on stage. If you're someone that's just molding a physique to how you want it to look in your own image, well, then this is a different conversation. But then you also, one of the things that you mentioned too, which is a whole nother element, but we can definitely, it's all part of the recipe. So you were talking about an example where, like, maybe you had somebody training legs twice a week. It needs to come up. The legs need to come up. You also mentioned, like, those would be the days where, if food volumes and calories were higher, it would be those days. So one, I want to ask you, have you always done it like that, where it's that day the food goes up? And have you ever experimented, like, there's all these different theories and there's a million ways to get results. So have you ever done it where it's like, maybe you loaded the day before a big body part, or, there's different aspects. And then you also touched on, kind of in the same breath, like resting the day before a big body part, which I think makes a ton of sense. But then what I'm about to say might sound completely opposite of that thinking. I totally agree with that thinking. Totally see the application of it. I did that personally for years. Monday was always like fucking leg day, brother. Like I was going to war with legs every Monday. And it was like Sunday, I would purposely, Sunday was always a rest day. And if I was like, this is back, I'm doing cheat meals and shit, like I'd have my biggest cheat meal that I could have Sunday night, like to load going into Monday. Um, so that's a way that I've done it. Now when I program for clients, especially with some of these, guys, gals, whoever, people that are training legs multiple times a week, almost especially for the ladies, because a lot of them are on 3 times a week, I try to have a day off after legs because like I think about how I feel when I'm done with legs, dude. I am toast. Like if you told me that I have to train legs and then tomorrow I have to go hit like whatever, push or pull, it's not going to be as good as it could have been. And then I feel like that's holding me back from recovering from that leg day. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on it and how it's evolved, because I know we've all tried every possible variation, but it sounds like you've kind of found this groove where you have the higher food volumes on that day that needs to come up.
Yeah, I've done both. Personally, I probably prefer if I'm going to have excess food volume, it's the day before, especially if we're talking, just because I know for me, maybe unless the food volume was pre-legs, but I don't have my appetite gets shot after training, and it's worth those meals after training. And so I'd much rather have that surplus of calories be the day before, especially if it's because you have a lot of time in your day when you don't have a training block. Like you can spread your meals apart further. Maybe you can get some more movement in, hydration can be higher, whatever. So personally, I prefer that if I'm adding in food. Clients, it's just, there's a lot of factors. Like, do they work a 9 to 5? Because if that's the case, I want them to fresh for legs or the body part we're trying to bring up. So I'll put it on a weekend. When they're off work and they can like get up, take their time, maybe they could get another meal in before training, whatever. I just feel,
and then you have to just come home and chill. It's like go home and recover.
Yeah. You don't have to get ready for work the next day if it's on a Saturday. So I think I'm used to high calories for so long that there's really no way around that. I had a period of time where I had a specific leg that was 200 grams of carbs higher base training diet. And that I didn't like. It was just too much food. And then the training intensity, I just felt miserable probably for days. So right now I do have it to where I have an off day before and after legs.
Yeah.
What I was doing earlier this was, for some reason, for me, I just don't get as fatigued after like ham and glutes and hinge movements. Like I could train the next day and still keep the intensity. But if it's quad based, like if I get on a hack or a safety bar squat and do a leg press, like, man, dude, that leaves me spent for like 48 hours. So
Same.
I need an off day after the quad days, but I can hams and glutes. I recover well enough from that Dusty and I, we would RDL, and then, 48 hours later, weeks later, we could be the rows. Like I don't have any lower back fatigue, cripples me in that area, but quads definitely need more recovery time for me. But yeah, as far as if I had my choice, I would, I'd load the day before, knowing my body now.
Yeah.
And I think you just got to figure out what works for you, or like I got to figure out what works for a client. Or running into appetite issues with too much food on a training day, then I'll move it to an off day. If it's someone that there's someone that needs the free meal built in each week, I'll at least give them guidelines on like, hey, let's put that free meal before a leg day. So it's we're going into it like with our highest caloric expenditure training wise. That way at least it has more warrant to me in my head with programming it.
Yeah. And then what have you seen? Like, have you seen any themes like with recovery and when people need that, like either the food or the rest days, like from male to female? Like what have you seen coaching both sides of the fence? I'm just curious if it lines up with the same experience that I've had.
Females can go
I guess it
forever.
too, and it's going to depend too on the division. So like your figure girls are not going to train the same leg volume that your wellness girls are, or what have you, right? But what were you going to say? That was pretty much what I was getting at. You were saying,
Women will go forever,
yeah,
and I'm like pushing them into a deload. Like I'm like,
yeah,
how are you not broken down? Like
yeah. It's
I
wild the
get
amount of
6
work.
weeks in and I'm like just hammered. Like I don't
Yeah,
even want to go to the gym.
yeah,
And women typically give better feedback in the update forums than men too.
yes,
So it's like I know they're giving me, you know, ample feedback, but I just think maybe they can take more, or maybe they're, you know, some of the girls I work with are just really they're I guess maybe have the comparison factor like men do. So like, well, can you bench 405? Can you squat 405? Like they just want to go hard no matter what.
yeah.
Um,
There's less
with
ego
men,
about the numbers.
with men, I think, and I was maybe this way too. Like, you know, there's almost like a pride thing. They don't want to admit that I need a deload, that like I'm getting worse. So it usually leads. I have a couple guys that have been with me long enough to where like they can just tell me now, like, hey, I need a deload. I don't want to go to the gym. Like, okay, you know your body. Like, I'm not going to tell you you're a pussy. Like, you are actually you've progressed. That's where I want you to be.
Yeah.
I have some guys who like 1 week they start to give me weird feedback. I'm like, all right, I think you need it. And then sure enough, the next update, I'm like, yep, let's deload this. Let's cut the volume back. Maybe the food stays. It depends on the situation. Food might go down. It might stay the same, but I think recovery wise, if you're training, you need a lot less, you need more than you think. And like this year, 2022 has been I finally have figured out like, man, 5 to 6 weeks, I can have a really good training wave. And then
yep.
We're in the gray area. Like maybe I'll get better going into that seventh, but I very well could set myself up for a rough next 4 weeks. If I push too hard that 7th week, I might screw myself for 3 more weeks. So really I have to untie all emotions to be in the gym and wanting to train. And that's forced me to be like, all right, obviously, you know, I can hammer my work and being busy with clients and stuff, but I've also had to be like, I need to not necessarily figure out a hobby, but I need to be okay with like spending less time in the gym for 7 to 10 days. Like just recently with my PRP, I took 4 straight days off from the gym. And by day 3, I was like, fuck, I want to train. Like I am bored.
Yeah.
But I was like, I've been here before. Like, you know what happens when you go back early. Even then, like, even when I went back to the gym, it was 3D volume session. So it's only half the work I'm normally doing. So you leave just like, man, that was cool, but I could have done more. But once you get those first sessions, like, damn, everything feels so good. I'm good. I'm connected. I don't have brain fog. Like I want to be there. So I do think like if we break down the periodization cycle, like how often do you think you need to deload personally to be your best? Like if you ballparked it, how many weeks or days?
For me, I can go 6. I deload every 6. So I get 5 hard weeks in, and then just just inevitably, it seems like no matter what I do, if I intentionally
set my 6th week as a deload,
week 6, yeah. It doesn't matter if I set myself up to sleep more, calories are up, PEDs are up, end of week 4, I finished my training week essentially with legs on Saturday, and then have a rest day the following day. That Sunday of week 4 after legs, I'm like, this week is gonna fucking, I don't even want to go. Like this is like like every little thing, like, you know, your joints eventually start to feel worn down. Like you just, you know, and for me, a big one is like, and it took me years and years to realize this in myself. It took John like hammering this into my brain that this was just part of this process. But my mood is just a huge thing. I can be I'm in the same parameters every day, dude. My life is the same every day. So then I know when I'm feeling like up and down, it's just because of that. Like my life isn't up and down, up and down. My life is the same every day. So if I'm feeling lesser about it, it's because my training fatigue has just gotten to a point. And without question, every time I pull it down, I'm like kind of bummed to go in and deload. I'm like, this training kind of sucks, whatever. And then by like Friday of the deload week, I'm like, life is good and I'm ready to fuck shit up. Like I need to be mature enough to see this week to the end. That way I can get through the next 5. But to your point, like, man, you aren't kidding. Like with the ladies, man, they just have another gear about them. In terms, I think both in terms of like pain tolerance in the gym, like getting to and or near and to failure. I have an easier time like conveying, especially remotely. I have an easier time conveying what sets need to look like, especially for legs. I have an easier time conveying that message to females than I do to my guys. Even it seems like, like the ladies that I have, man, I have wellness girls that go in and have some type of either squat or leg press pattern 3 times a week. And they are just burying it until the bitter end where I'm almost like, part of my feedback, I'm like, this is exceptional, but please find someone in the gym that looks like they know what they're doing to spot you, because this is buried until the absolute end. And then more times than not, I have guys that like, I have to play back the first rep on video and be like, look at the speed of this rep. This is when you racked it. Like this speed of this rep is no different. I scroll it back to the first rep and it's like, man, you still had like this is 11 RIR. Like we need so much more than this. And that's just never really been the case. Granted, I probably just have a good set of ladies that really care about their training. But so I've seen that like in terms of individual set, like pain tolerance, but then also like volume and continuous workload. Like you said, like they can just come back and come back and come back. I've seen, training age and like how much stimulus you've accrued over your entire journey, I think is going to slowly like bring your time between deloads closer and closer. Like, we've been training for 10 plus years, both of us, and we've both settled at like this 5 or 6 week mark. I have guys that are, 20 to 25, let's say, and, on the lower end of that 20, 21, 22, it might be 10 or 12 weeks before one of these guys comes to me and they're like, hey man, like I didn't really want to go to the gym this week. And it's like, okay, well then now it's time to pull it back. But man, with the ladies, like even in that same age bracket, it just seems like you almost have to coax like the feedback out of them that they might need a deload or just a couple of days to pull it back, because more times than not, they're just ready to continue on. So I think that's a funny kind of observation as we grow in our coaching. But like you said, I do think that they also provide better feedback. So it's an interesting give and take. So back to like the actual training aspect of it, what do you see as far as like splitting up volume? Because like we were saying, like there's no rules as far as split. How, like, let's say you have someone that wants to bring 2 body parts up. Do you go about that within one training block, or will you split it up and say, hey, we're going to go every other, like, this body part's prioritized, then the next block, this other one is? I'd just be curious to hear how you typically go about it. Of course, context is king. It depends is always the right answer. But like, just so that people understand the thought process, how would you normally go about something like that?
So I think 2 body parts can be done at once. If we're talking specific, like if legs need to come up as a whole, like, all right, legs is the focus. I'm not really focused on anything else, but if it like in your case, arms and delts, okay, I can find a way to, I can have 4 different delt sessions a week if I wanted. I mean, I could put delts with everything. A lot of so figure girl that with like what's figure delts
X-frame
into a small waist into flaring quads. That's right down the front shot. So I feel like medials for figure and rear delts is huge. Delts in general, but especially medial delts. if you think about it from a recovery standpoint, does training your medials really tax that recovery exceptionally hard? I don't think so, especially if we're keeping the volume low each session, 2 to 3 sets. Maybe I program like a muscle round or a cluster set for some intensity. And then I typically like whatever body part I'm trying to bring up, like one of those across the week is like, this is the one, this is your power, your heavy, your give everything you got session. The rest might be like, it's just tertiary volume where it's like, you're not going through the motions. It's not fluff, but at the same time, maybe the whole gut mentality doesn't apply to a set of laterals. You know what I mean? Like on a or a cable level. I know, you know what I mean? So, and then with arms, same thing. I can spread that across the week. If I wanted, to prioritize my chest different than I'm doing, I would, one day is going to be my power press day. And then maybe depending on my individual recovery, which is probably 3 days, that fourth day I'm back and I would increase the volume with lower loads. But in doing that, if I'm doing the way I did it before, which was like everything's heavy all the time, and like my joints are connected tissue beating over and over and over, I get really strong on paper, but it's not necessarily yielding hypertrophy. And that was the biggest realization I had to make. So I can bring up other parts by not having that approach to everything. If I think about progressive overload and other than the load, because at some point, we've both been doing this a long time. Like, how many more pounds on the bar am I actually going to add over the course of the rest of my career? 15, 20, 30, I don't know. I'm not adding plates at the. So when I think about it from that vantage point, it's like, all right, I need to get more efficient with the work I am doing. And then from there, I reverse engineer and I look at, how am I executing everything? The weak body parts, especially, like, I don't think weak body parts need more volume right away. Most need to double down on how they're executing. That's why, the idea, even so, like we talked about earlier, a big body part coming off an off day. But what about programming in a way that the weak body part comes off and you're fresh mentally, you're just to get in the gym, you want to get in there, you want to give it your all. And in doing that, like, I feel like that for the best success for bringing up body part is your mind muscle connection will be the best. You'll connect the best. And then from there, maybe over time, we even turn a weakness into a strength and we can back it down to maintenance volume. So I don't know if I answer your question directly, but I do think you can. And that's where, like, again, we've hit on this a couple times. The split, it does not matter. I think when you're a beginner or an intermediate, sure, like the split, I'm going to tell you the split and you're going to follow it, but it's probably not going to change a whole lot. Right. We're probably not going to get into weaknesses when overall size and foundation is the basis of the goal. Right. But along the way, it's like, if I see, even in a younger intermediate, if I see like, man, your quads really respond, but your hamstrings don't. Okay, I need to change up your program. Learn that no matter what you do for quads, they're going to keep growing. So rather than even though you're young and need a ton of size overall, I don't want to just, unless the goal is like, I just want to have the craziest quads on the planet. I don't care about
quads.
Yeah. Okay, dude, I'll help you get there. But if it's like the goal is the stage and being the most complete bodybuilder you can be, we have to recognize that you have a connection to your quads that I don't, most other people don't. So tailor that volume back. And that can be very, like we've talked about, it can be very hard because usually when you're getting going, you love training the body part that you connect best with. I find that with everyone, male and female. Like, what's your favorite body? Back. What's your best body part? Oh, it's my back. Well, that's why it's your favorite. Same with me. Like, back was my favorite training because it developed the best.
So let me ask you then, do you not look forward? Like, maybe it's different now as you've grown and like you are kind of prioritizing it, strategically what you want to do to improve it. But in the past, was that the case where you like didn't look forward to training chest because it was a body part that you struggled to connect with?
I looked forward to training it. I think I had a lot more ego with I
the
wasn't
numbers.
in a place where I would lower the weight.
Yeah.
I'm a 250-pound guy, and I'm not using dumbbells above 100 right now for chest movements. Like
Yeah.
I
Oh,
see,
dude, you've seen my videos, dude. I don't.
yeah,
I'm weak as hell for bodybuilding. I get people, man, commenting on my shit where they're like, "Bro, what's the deal? Where are the free weights? Where are the heavy weights? All this stuff." I commented back to a guy one time, and I was like, "Hey, man, I'm just relearning all this and just trying to get better." And immediately, like, there's no response. You know what I mean? Because
yeah.
what can you say? Like, I'm a beginner. Like, I'm trying to relearn this shit. Um,
No, I think that's a good segue into learning what movements work. Like for years, I
yes.
tried to make the barbell work for me, and it does not.
Man,
Not
that's such a great point,
my
especially
pressing mechanics do not like the incline barbell, no matter what the angle is, no matter
right,
how I, bring the elbows in, flare them out, grip,
right.
width, whatever. Smith is different because the Smith is
Yeah.
fixed, and my stabilizers don't have to play as big a role. I can rock with a Smith, and then dump too. But I think for anybody younger listening, like if you're struggling with a movement and you're not struggling, you don't want to get away from the movement simply because you're lazy and the movement's hard, voice that to your coach, or if you're on programming, recognize that like, hey, there's other ways to get to the finish line. Like I don't have to do this movement because everybody on Instagram is doing this movement, or because, yeah, success leaves clues, but like we talked about Kevin Levrone. Like Kevin Levrone learned how hyper responsive he was after he got ready for the Olympia, pressing the bar for 8 weeks. The 45-pound bar, and stood on
Yeah,
Olympia's
and came out and looked fucking blown out. Yeah.
took fifth with a 45-pound bar.
Yeah.
So that when we talk like hyper responsiveness, yeah, my delts might respond hyper compared to the rest of my body, but by no means am I like world class delts.
They're pretty damn
Sub
good.
so
I'll give it to you. They're pretty damn good. But
so how do you go about with yourself, and then especially I want to hear how you go about it with clients, like ascertaining what movements that they're connecting best with? Because I find as a personal trainer and then coaching online, I've learned all the cues to give as to how to increase mind muscle connection, mostly because I'm always working on myself.
yeah.
It's another thing for a client to take what you're giving you wise when you respond to their videos, apply it, and then relay it to you like, hey, I'm feeling this, or like I'm not
Yeah.
feeling this. So how do you go with yourself and then the client?
It's definitely easier, of course, with yourself because you're there.
Right.
Like you're feeling this. Like, but I just, side note, I do just want to touch on how awesome of a point that is because, man, like I've talked about, like basically everything from the waist up for me is a work in progress compared to my legs, where it's like, I tried to force certain movements for years. For man, I was barbell. Like it's a staple for you guys, you and Dusty. It's both worked for you guys. I was barbell deadlifting, dead stop from the floor, barbell rowing, like all these things with numbers that made people say, wow, that's impressive. This is good, whatever. And it's like my back didn't grow. So what do I do now? Like, so I think like just putting the dogma aside, like, I have a buddy that, Gary Turner, for years, like struggled to bring up his quads. Everyone would tell him, hey, you need to bring up the quads. And he would spend fucking 6, 7 off seasons in a row just buried in a squat rack, like back barbell squatting. And he's got long femurs, he's got short shins, like was never ever going to work for him. And then it's like, okay, then now we get you set up in, a Smith with, a foam roller behind your back so that it angles better for you. And now all of a sudden your quads grow. I think exercise selection is like huge, like making sure just a simple proxy is just, do you feel the working muscle when you finish a really good set of this exercise? If you're targeting your side delts, do you finish this exercise and your side delts feel blown out? If so, then that's probably something you want to stick with. If you're just, you get off of it and your joints hurt and you don't feel any pump in the working muscle for any exercise, I would have, of course, you'd want your coach to look at anything execution wise that could be improved. But man, there's sometimes, like we were talking about, like coaching wise, I get videos back, I relay all these different cues, like everything that I could do. I watch it on film with them where I'm like pointing and circling different things. And like, for example, I have a client that I work with, and the kid's a machine. He's on every detail of it. He's super well versed in biomechanics and anatomy and all of it. So it's like when I tell him to depress the scapula first as you initiate a lat row, he knows, like he does this shit. Um, but I've had him set up on that one arm kind of aligned cable row to get the lat short. I've seen you doing it. And he nails this thing, dude, has been nailing it for weeks. And he's like, I just don't feel this. Like point blank, I just don't feel this in my lats. And it's like, man, after 5 or 6 weeks, it's like, okay, well, then we need to find something else that works. Because if there's nothing going on, like we're not going to improve this body part. So yeah, that's a big one. And then so for on the coaching side of it, I would say, I try to walk through everything initially. I film a lot of my own stuff and have it up on Instagram, YouTube for my clients as a visual example. Like, a lot of people are like visual learners. So that's a really big resource. I think a lot of people could do their clients a favor and just film it how you want it to be done. No better way to assure that you're getting what you're asking for than to just communicate it clearly. And then I think a big part of it too is when they send you something back, if it does need to be adjusted, I use the Loom app. Anybody that's coaching, I'm sure you guys have heard of it. If not, I would definitely suggest getting on it. You are bringing another level of feedback to your clients, where it's almost like, like on a football replay, where it's like they're on the screen circling shit and drawing through the plays and all this stuff. You can walk through somebody's training footage on your screen with you off in the corner, pausing it, giving out cues. So that's just a big one. I just try to be as hands-on as possible. I mean, my clients know this. I'll send a 20-minute Loom response as a check-in, where I'm like just in the weeds on shit. I'm pulling up examples on the screen, all this stuff. And that's a big thing too. That's another point I want to make kind of coming out of this is, we've talked about it. We've heard Dusty talk about it, where it's like, how easy is it to film your shit without getting in anybody's way? Man, at this point, if you aren't utilizing the most basic technologies that we have to film your training and assess it, either just by yourself or with a coach, man, I just think you're doing yourself a disservice. I've been doing this for 10 plus years. You've been doing this for even longer. We can tell you for sure, every set that I've ever done felt different than how it actually looked on camera every single time. So it's like, like we have in other sports, like all these athletes go and watch film from practice, from games, whatever. That's our game film as bodybuilders and physique athletes, is filming your training and making sure that you're getting the most of it. Because like you said, you might not even need more volume. You just might need to execute, first and foremost, execute the volume you are doing. And then all of a sudden you might see that that's a hyper, a well-responding body part that only needs 8 sets a week, if you do it right the first time. So yeah, I don't know if that answered the question, but I think just seeing it on video and communicating is a big one. And then just for my own bodybuilding, it was kind of just giving up some of these like emotional attachment, like especially for back, man. I love to pull deadlifts from the floor. I loved pulling a big number, having an ego about it. I loved like a traditional just T-bar, like where it's like a barbell between your legs with the little handle. Loved loading that thing up and doing it. And it's like, man, I'd get off it and my biceps would be super pumped and my back was not pumped, didn't grow. So a big part of it is kind of just letting go of those things that you have an emotional attachment to, because it's not going to serve you in terms of making progress.
Well, we grew up watching Ronnie do it. So it was almost
Ronnie
like
and Dorian, dude. You had to.
We had these movements.
You had to.
So same thing. The T, man, that's for all my bicep tendonitis that I deal with now was probably from fucking those close grip T-bar rows. I think about the thing about like to grow a muscle, you need mechanical tension. If half of every rep is like you fighting against your body just to even support, with an incline barbell, for me, for example, is just like, man, My pecs, maybe they got a little bit of work, but for me, it's like the serratus is more sore because I'm trying to stabilize my core, keep my chest or my thoracic spine extended. It's just garbage. It doesn't where I have long arms. I'm not a traditionally strong presser as it is. So eventually I just had to get away from it. And then even same thing, like deadlifts. I always tell people this, that's my death row lift. Give me one lift to do before you put me on the gas chamber. It's let me deadlift, give me all the weights and I'm going to move. But at the same time, you have to assess that recovery budget. The deadlift takes a extreme amount of recovery.
Might be number one.
Yeah. The stronger you get, the more recovery you will require. For me, I get up to like 5 plates a side and I love being there and I can go higher, but at what extent that I can't give my legs work.
Right.
The effort they need.
And for people listening, that's not 5 plates aside for one. Like we're talking Tommy doing a bodybuilding working set with 5 plates aside where it's 8, 10, 12. Like think about the cost that it's gonna like to come back and recover from that. Like I would do that, man. And same deal. Like I would go in and like first movement, like I'm throwing my belt into the squat rack and like just ripping deadlifts off the floor. And then it's like, okay, even if you're only doing one working set, you've gone up a plate each time to warm up and you've done all this work. And then now you got to go try and stimulate your lats, stimulate your upper back. And it's like, I would be toast after deadlifting first. And it's like, at a certain point, what matters more, this ego of me deadlifting in front of everybody in this gym or me having a big back when I turn around on stage?
Right. I will think, and we've see a lot of it right now because the conversation we're having is more people are having these conversations on podcasts and on Instagram. And I think it's great because it's allowed me to learn. It's allowed me to become a better bodybuilder and turn a better coach. I do think you can get paralysis analysis a little bit. And also I see John has done a good job of illustrating this. And then Cassim also has talked about it. Like just because you get a sensation in something does not mean growth is happening. Doesn't mean you're getting enough stimulus to cause change. You know what I mean? By this point of doing this for so long, I have enough mind muscle connection to where I could get a pump just from, doing this with my bicep for 3 minutes.
Some laterals off to the side.
It doesn't mean I'm growing. You still need the stimulus. So when I see, I think it's good to establish mind muscle connection with a lighter weight and to really emphasize perfect form. And I kind of illustrated this in a post the other day with training back, like do 30-pound dumbbell row is only going to get so far. I mean, if we're talking putting on, you coined it in a different podcast, like we're adding more human to your frame, like a 30-pound dumbbell. I've carried grocery bags that weigh 30 pounds. We're not doing anything. So there is a fine line too, just because you're getting, like, it's not all about sensation. That's what your warm up and your feeder sets are for, is to establish that mind muscle connection, get the neurons firing to the area. And then you have to trust for your working sets. You're not thinking, you're just training. So I think that's a good point to make in terms of bringing up weak body parts, because if it's weak, it just needs more tension applied to it, however you go about that. So redefine. And I think with beginners, and I learned this through personal training, like when I get maybe they have a little bit of experience lifting weights, but they want to get into it further, like I'm putting them mostly in machines, pin loaded machines, so they don't have to worry about stabilization. We learn mind muscle connection. After a 12-week block there, then maybe we'll go into like, all right, your free weights or your heavy hitters or your more your compound movements to more direct work. But I think learning mind muscle connection is very hard with free weights.
It is, yeah. And even for people that are advanced, like to your point about just feeling some type of sensation when you're training, I agree. I think that it's probably, you want to feel the target muscle working, especially like in your warm-up sets, your feeder sets. And you want to feel like you're initiating whatever the movement is with the target muscle so that you can assure that's like doing the bulk of the work. But on the flip side of it, you're right, because there are certain movements where it's like, man, especially some of these like bigger upper back type rows, it's like, I'm not necessarily like pinching and squeezing. Like there's like some violence to these movements, and you finish it and you get off, and there's a ton of sensation. There's a ton of pump in your upper back, but I'm not like slowly visualizing each fiber like lengthening and contracting in my traps. Like I've kind of established that connection over years and within my warm-ups and working up to that weight. And then I'm kind of just like, you kind of just have to let it fly. And then make sure that like you can recreate those same training parameters each time. That way there's objective progress happening. So it's like, instead of like, continuing to just get looser and looser by means of, moving more weight, that will then defeat the purpose. So, for the listener, there's definitely like this line to tote. But I would agree that sensation doesn't always necessarily mean that growth is happening. I mean, there's a couple proxies I think that make sense. Like pump is definitely one of them, and that's even more so like finishing the exercise, I think, than while you're doing it. But then also it's like, is your performance just objectively going up? If you use the same form each time and your either weights or reps go up, and then from those working sets that you are doing where you made progress in the performance, if those working sets A, give you a pump, but then B, you are recovered enough to come back and do it and perform with an increase next time as well, all of that is a good idea that there's like stimulus and growth happening, like that this overload and then adapt process is happening. So yeah, like with weak body parts, that's just a big part of it. So I would try to make sure, yeah, definitely that you can feel the working muscle on a weaker body part and stick with those movements. But then also sometimes like it's just a matter of like kind of forcing the progress. Like you have to expose that muscle to a novel new level of stimulus every time. So whether it's volume or execution or whatever the case is, you need to try to be pushing it forward to actually grow and improve that body part.
Right. I mean, even identified that I'm a weak presser, that doesn't stop me from trying to get strong as a presser. Now I've just had to go back to square one, be a big guy that's using 60-pound dumbbells for incline pressing, whatever the case is. And from there, it's like, okay, now I'm using the 90s.
Right.
In X amount of months,
But with that better form, with that better connection, I get off and my pecs are blown up and my shoulder and elbow joints don't bother me. And I can come back in 10 days and progress from this. Like, yeah, starting at 60 is the way to go, because like we've said on different posts and different things back and forth to each other, we're trying to do this for the next 10 years. So it's like, if you're just coming out guns blazing with the 180s for 12, like, where do you go from there, dude? Like, what room have you left yourself to progress? So yeah, totally understand that.
Well, Dante had a good piece of advice to me or for me as well. And he just said, like, if something hasn't really put on some size after like 3 to 5 years, like you kind of just need to get weird with it. You need to get outside of the box. And I think he's big on this, and I find a lot of value in it too for myself and clients, is like incorporating pauses in the stretch, all the movements, especially for a weak body part, because if I would say 9 times out of 10, if I have a weak body part, first I need to reverse engineer my execution before I even address the volume. So how can I do that? The most logical way for me is to incorporate a pause in the stretch or in the lengthened position, because that forces me to think about initiating with the target muscle first, not just letting inertia or ego or the rest of my body, mechanical advantage kick in. Think if you're someone who has a weak body part, and you're saying maybe that's the first addition you make, is like, all right, every rep, there's a 1 count pause, a full dead stop. And I'm going to really make sure this muscle is working. And I bet you do that, and you can't do as much volume as you had previously. You might need less volume incorporating that, because you're actually fatiguing the muscle.
Yeah, that's definitely become a staple. That's a great point. That's become a staple, not even just for the people that I help, but for myself too. It's just a good way
Right.
to make sure, you know, even as someone, that we would consider advanced, like I want to just make sure I'm getting the most out of each rep. So if that 1 second pause every single time just becomes what my standard is, and
Yep.
I add reps or weight to that, I know I did it within the same parameters. Like there, it's what I'm getting at is it's very easy to standardize what your reps look like if you're just doing this every time. If they all look the same, um, I think you're headed in the right direction. So I think we just passed an hour. So
Yeah.
that was, I think, definitely a good topic for both of us being kind of the training heads that we are. Um, I don't know if there's any final points or takeaways that you want to add.
I think it's just to remember that if, within your goal of bodybuilding or building a better physique, like training is the catalyst that creates the stimulus for that. So it's in your best to obsess over getting better, whether it's, filming your sets, working with a coach, um, collecting feedback that's actually valuable for your coach and yourself. Like these are all things that requestment of your time and energy. Like if you're someone who just wants to go to the gym, get it in and get out, like I don't think you can expect results if that's all you're putting into it. Like I put a lot of training, not only the programming of it, but the execution of it, the warm-ups for it, the body work I get to make sure I can stay in a good to perform. So I just, when we talk about is bodybuilding a sport, maybe not, but training is a skill. Repetition.
Absolutely.
I heard Ron Partlow say something about, the law of repetition. Like if you just think over the course of years, like there will be progress. I don't know how much, that's all up to the individual and a lot of other factors, but there will be progress. So just keep that in mind. Like your training is the catalyst that's going to build you the physique you want.
Yeah, the training is, I don't know who coined this, but it's a good one. Training I've heard described as the match that lights everything that we're trying to do. So
Yeah, that's good.
you gotta have
That's
that.
good.
Yeah, I
Good.
can't take credit for that one. I wish I could give credit to whoever it was, but that always stuck with me because it's like, the fire doesn't even start other than with this. So
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, man, great stuff. Definitely happy to get on this topic with you. This was something similar to what we did on Instagram Live. So glad to put this kind of on record here for all the listeners. Thanks again to everybody that's continued to reach out and leave comments and messages. Tommy and I appreciate it. So for Tommy Stiles, I'm Joseph PIRCHER. This was a Thinking Man's podcast, and we are out.